For a few years around 2011, Plymouth had a big wheel on Plymouth Hoe. It could be seen for miles.
I turn myself around now, look back in disgrace. I think of what I've done now, but time has took its place. You call me every night now, and I'm not gonna chase. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. You look into my eyes now, deep inside my mind. You don't know how I feel, you're talking all the time. The beauty lies within you, the smile that's on your face. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. And every time I let you go, and every time I let you go, darling, I don't know. Will you spend the night through upon that special place? 'Cause all I wanna do now is hold your short hands. And when I'm alone now, you're part of my plans. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. Cause all I ever wanted was you.
That will then start it. Button next to it to stop it if you want to. Right. The volume buttons at the back. And if there's any problems, like lost for any reason, there's a red button up there on the ceiling. Just press that one. We can straight back down to it.
I'm just going to go to YouTube, so what's your name?
My name's John. I'm the manager.
Thank you very much, John.
No
Cheers.
problem. Cheers.
Mans and John White. Hello, this is Tim Mans and John White and Chris Robinson, and we're from Radio Plymouth, welcoming you aboard the Wheel of Plymouth. 365 tons of steel and stuff. You know, that's one for every day of the week. How does that work? Like clockwork, indeed. And you're in one of 42 air-conditioned capsules where you're about to take a trip that will give you a bird's-eye view of Plymouth from some 60 metres above the ground.
That's twice the height of Smeaton's Tower over there. You know, the striped lighthouse that used to stand out on the Eddystone Reef until the authorities became concerned about the rocks that it was standing on.
Yes, and so they built a new one in the 1880s, and someone had the bright idea of bringing the old one back and re-erecting it on Plymouth Hoe. Amazingly enough, this was relatively straightforward, as Smeaton had designed it so that all the enormous blocks that made up the lighthouse were interlocking and could be dismantled and reassembled.
Smeaton's Tower succeeded 3 wooden structures on the Eddystone Reef, and it was so famous and successful in its day that in 1860, 100 years after it had been completed, it was featured on the back of our old English pennies and stayed there until 1895.
And then it was reinstated in 1937, right through until decimalisation, which was how long ago?
In 1971. Thank you. And so, the next time you see an old penny, have a look. You'll see it just behind Britannia, on the other side from the Queen's Head.
OK, what else should we look at?
Well, beyond the lighthouse, that's Plymouth Sound, one of the world's great natural harbours. This was the last home stop for many famous trips and expeditions.
Sir Francis Drake left from here in 1577 on what would become a 3-year voyage of circumnavigation, and again in 1588, when he famously finished his game of bowls on the Hoe before setting off to see off the Spanish Armada.
It wasn't just bravado, he was waiting for the tide to turn, you know.
This was also the final departure point for the Pilgrim Fathers in 1620, before they set sail across the Atlantic in their tiny ship, the Mayflower, bound for a new life in the New World.
Captain Cook sailed from here too, on each of his 3 major trips to the Southern Hemisphere.
And so did the 22-year-old Charles Darwin when he left with Captain Fitzroy on the Beagle, bound for South America and the Far East, on a journey that would ultimately lead to Darwin's development of the theory of evolution.
Yes, the Beagle left from Barnpool on the other side of the entrance to the Tamar in what is now Cornwall, but was then West Stonehouse and part of Plymouth. We gave it back to the Cornish in 1844.
The Tamar, over there to the west of us, today separates Devon and Cornwall. It runs from here for some 50 miles to just a dozen or so miles from the north coast. So it virtually makes Cornwall into an island.
And if you look the other way to the east, you can see the mouth of the River Plym, which separates Plymouth from Plympton and Plymstock, although they all became part of one big city in 1967.
Looking out that way, of course, we can see, just to the left as we look out to the sea, the Royal Citadel.
Did you know that they say that this is the finest 17th century fortification in Europe?
Yes, and it's been continuously manned by British servicemen since 1670.
It's currently the home of 29 Commando.
It was built by King Charles II just after the restoration of the monarchy, which had happened 10 years earlier.
Plymouth had become the only town in England to successfully withstand a royalist siege, and had it fallen, the outcome of the English Civil War may not have gone in Cromwell's favour.
The Roundhead leader was well received when he came here in triumph after the Battle of Naseby in March 1645, but Plymouth's resistance of the royalist cause had angered Prince Charles, hence after the restoration of the monarchy, he ordered a fort much bigger than the one Drake had created in Elizabeth's reign, and much bigger than the original Plymouth Castle that gives the city its coat of arms.
Yes, and not only was it bigger, but the guns faced the town as well as the sea. Charles wasn't going to stand for any more trouble from the people of Plymouth.
By the way, did you know that it's said that every man, woman and child carried at least one stone up to the site to contribute to the construction of the citadel?
Really? I didn't know that. Talking of dumping stones, did you know that in order to get the Breakwater built, they dropped millions of tons of stone into Plymouth Sound?
Yes, evidently it took them over 30 years to complete. And above that massive stone deposit, the Breakwater that sits above the waterline is a mile long, about 22 yards wide, which is about as wide as a cricket pitch.
It certainly made a difference to life inside the harbour too. There had been dozens and dozens of ships wrecked around the Sound by storms prior to 1844.
Yeah, and it can still get a bit choppy out there sometimes too.
But most of the time, it's fine. And that's why it's so popular with sailors.
Yes, Plymouth has been a relatively safe haven ever since people started sailing anywhere.
Drake's Navy was built on the skills of fishermen who regularly sailed across the Atlantic to Newfoundland in the 16th century. Indeed, it was to supply the Navy with fresh water that Drake created the Leat to bring water into the town from Dartmoor.
So, Plymouth had the country's first municipal water supply?
Yes, and Cromwell consolidated the naval base here with the creation of a victualling yard by Drake's Castle on the Barbican, which is part of the old city.
If you look to the north and see the Tower of St Andrew's Church, the nearest one, not the one on the hill, that was roughly as far as Plymouth stretched beyond the harbour in Drake's day. It was all nestled around Sutton Pool, with nothing more than about half a mile from the waterside.
Apart from Plympton and Plymstock on the other side of the Plym, there was another smaller town not far from here, Stonehouse, which sat on the edge of a creek, most of which has been infilled in the last 100 years or so.
Yes, Plymouth used to be surrounded by creeks, which made it relatively relatively easy to defend during the Civil War.
The big change to the area came in the 1690s when King William III decided to build a dockyard here over on the Plymouth side of the Tamar.
It was called Plymouth Dock for the first century or so. Then it got to be so big, bigger than Stonehouse, bigger than Plymouth, bigger than Exeter, the county town, that people became concerned that their address didn't properly reflect their position in the grand scheme of things.
And so the king suggested they rechristen the town Devonport, as it was the port of Devon.
Ironically, that was just around the time that the Napoleonic Wars came to an end, and with it the golden age of Devonport.
Thereafter, Plymouth grew like Topsy in the wake of the Industrial Revolution and trade with the rest of the world. And by the time the next major war came around, the Great War, the three towns, Plymouth, Stonehouse and Devonport, had all expanded to meet each other.
Yes, and the man in charge of the defence of the area said he didn't want to deal with three separate authorities. And so, despite much defiance from Devonport, the three towns merged in 1914.
Of course, the Great War saw tragedy on an unprecedented scale, and the tallest of the war memorials in the Hoe Park commemorates the lives of those seamen lost in the 1914 to 1918 conflict.
There's also an army memorial at the corner of the park.
And a memorial to the Royal Marines just in front of the Citadel.
The Naval War Memorial was greatly extended after the Second World War, and more recently a further statue was erected in honour of the airmen who lost their lives during the 1939 to 1945 war.
Yes, unlike the First World War, the Second brought death and destruction to the city for the first time since the Civil War.
Plymouth was, per acre and per head of population, the worst bombed city in England. Over 1,200 civilians were killed, and most of the city centre was destroyed, along with most of the older parts of Devonport.
Happily, the old parts of Plymouth, the Barbican, got off quite lightly, and even though more Tudor and Jacobean buildings were pulled down before and after the war in the name of slum clearance, there are still more than 100 listed buildings there today.
Drake would still recognise the layout of the streets, and the area today boasts the largest concentration of cobbled streeting anywhere in the UK.
The devastation caused by the enemy bombing gave the planners a chance to make radical changes.
See the Great Green Boulevard running north from here. To the left of the hotel, that's Armada Way, planned by Sir Patrick Abercrombie and James Patton Watson to provide a clear link between the Hoe and the train station. That tall building there, way beyond the one with the butterfly roof, the Civic Centre.
Either side of Armada Way is the Plymouth Shopping Centre. Almost all of it, apart from the modern shopping mall to the east, laid out between 1950 and 1965. The Civic Centre was actually completed in 1962 and opened by the Queen.
Nowhere else in Britain is there such an exclusive concentration of commercial buildings from one time period. This is the second Elizabethan Plymouth, and already large parts of it have become listed, and architecture students from all over the world come to wander up and down Royal Parade.
Did you know it's said to be modelled roughly on Princess Street in Edinburgh, with monuments and memorials down one side and shops down the other?
The Civic Centre Tower block was built to complement the Tower of the Guildhall, which was gutted during the war and reopened by Field Marshal Montgomery in the 1950s, and St Andrew's Church, which was also burnt out and rebuilt in the 50s.
And instead of Edinburgh Castle and the Royal Mile, we have the Royal Citadel and the Hoe Promenade.
Yes, this is Plymouth's public playground. The university have their graduation ceremonies on the Hoe. Thousands come here every August to watch the National Fireworks Competition. News are played here. And there are over 100,000 people here to see Sir Francis Chichester arrive back after his solo circumnavigation of the world in 1967.
Thousands watch other events here in the Sound too. International yacht races, the transatlantic, tall ships, powerboats and the America's Cup, all on the water, surrounded by a superb natural amphitheatre to the west of Drake's Island.
Drake's Island?
Yes, it used to be St Michael's Island, and before that St Nicholas's Island. But Drake, who served Plymouth as mayor, was also made governor of the island, and it's his name that stuck. It was only recently surrendered by the Ministry of Defence and may yet be redeveloped with a hotel and other facilities, but the beauty of the Sound is essentially how unspoilt it has been for centuries.
Yes, and if you're looking to go on another trip after you leave the wheel, then Mount Edgecombe to the west over there offers one of the finest country parks in England. And it's free.
And then there's Mount Batten on the other side of the Sound, where the Round Tower is, on the headland. It used to be an RAF flying boat base, and that's just a short ferry trip away, and that is fascinating too.
As is the Barbican, with its old buildings, bars and Elizabethan garden.
So enjoy the city. If you're a visitor, there's plenty to discover.
And if you live here, there's still probably a few things you don't know about it.
Having seen it now from on high, we hope you'll be tempted to explore our hidden delights.
If you'd like to know more about the city's history, then check out chrisrobinson.co.uk or visit my shop on the Barbican.
And don't forget, wherever you go, stay tuned to Radio Plymouth on 106.7 FM for all your local news, travel information, and the best music on air.
The Wheel of Plymouth is operated by Great City Attractions. For more information on their other attractions, please visit www.greatcityattractions.com.
The sound of the city, 106.7 Radio Plymouth. Turn myself around now, look back in disgrace. I think of what I've done now, when time has took its place. You call me every night now, and I'm not gonna chase. 'Cause all I ever wanted time I'll let you go. Darling, I don't know. Will you spend the night through upon that special place? 'Cause all I wanna do now is hold your short hands. And when I'm alone now, you're part of my plans. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. Turn myself around now, I look back in disgrace. I think of what I've done now, when time has took its place. You call me every night now, and I'm not gonna chase. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. 'Cause all I ever wanted was you. You look into my eyes now, deep inside my mind. You don't know how I feel, you're talking all the time. The beauty lies within you, the smile that's on your face.
Music with great thanks by Chris Oxland, Oxland Music on Facebook. This has been Chris Summerfield Video 2018. You can contact me at ccs2012@hotmail.com, and if you can sponsor my videos, you can pay me at ccs1@gmail.com. Thanks for watching the video.